we got to talk about some of the wrestling on the program, Brian. And there's a lot of people saying you can't be closed-minded. You can't be closed-minded if you don't listen to the other side, the people with other opinions or other thought processes or other ways of presenting the pro wrestling. If you don't listen to what they have to say and try to decide for yourself, maybe dispel some preconceived notions, try to understand how they think, to find the common ground and realize that maybe somebody might not be as batshit insane as you think they are. They might not be in over their head, or that maybe dispel the notion that in this case, a former Emmy award-winning soap opera director may not realize what the hell they signed up for when they're trying to book the wrestling or write the wrestling or whatever it is that they call the wrestling. And so we heard that one of the creative members of the think tank over at AEW, Alexandra Pepperday, has done an interview out in the public for consumption of people. And I got to admit that I've never met Alexandra Pepperday. I've never seen her. Haven't seen a picture of her, and I've never heard her speak. And so I thought, what better way to try to listen to examine and review in their own words what a member of the opposition party, you might say, has to say for themselves about what they're doing, and then try to find the good in it, and maybe dispel the notion that she's as lost as a rat trying to find a corner to silo. So, and Brian, you have not heard this podcast. I've not heard this podcast. I don't know how long this whole podcast was, but we asked a minion of the Arcadian Vanguard Network, Jay Sharknado, to...
I wouldn't use the term minion.
Well, okay, slave.
No, again, no.
Indentured servant.
Beloved employee. Wonderful employee.
Yes, yes.
Tremendous person. Like, where are these kind of things?
She's got a great personality.
Oh, personality.
But we asked him to find some salient, pithy points, remarks, comments that were made on this program that would indicate that those folks over there have a grip on this thing and they know exactly what they're doing to producing the wrestling for the fans. And we're going to try to listen to some of this and see if they can sway our opinion. Is that basically the gist of what we're trying to do here? We're going into this with open minds. We haven't heard anything, no preconceived notions. We're listening to it now in front of the people.
Well, again, no, that's true. We're hearing it for the first time. I don't know what we're doing this for. I'm curious to hear, we've heard of her. And actually, as I'm looking at this, turns out her name is Jennifer Pepperman.
That's what I said.
I thought her name was
Alexandra Pepperday.
Well, she's pulling the old switcheroo, it appears, but she was on the AEW Unrestricted podcast. That is an official AEW podcast. They produce it. It is hosted by Will Washington and Aubrey Edwards.
Dog, have we ever heard Aubrey Ed talk? Or does she just say nay a lot?
I don't know. We heard her talk that time. She said, "Fuck you" about you. That was the only time I remember hearing her talk.
There you go. Yeah, she got a potty mouth, that young lady. And that's a shame, because the last time I heard her talk, I think she was sick, because she was definitely a little hoarse. And Will Washington, he's another one of the writers that they've hired, right? What does his background come from? Did he write Harlequin romance novels, or?
Well, he is someone whose name a lot of people just heard of recently, like me, and he was, I think, doing positive AEW reviews for one of the websites. It may have been Fightful, I'm not even sure. And then he went to AEW because Tony Khan liked his positive reviews. Also, he's Swerve Strickland's cousin, and he worked... he's one of the people either responsible... Well, he's responsible one way or the other. One of the people responsible, either good or bad, for the entire Swerve Strickland arc.
Well, and he's...
a podcast host. And a podcast host, apparently.
Swerve swerves when he drives. What about when he's driving one of those big arcs down the fucking river? With two animals of each in every. All right, nevertheless.
It's nice to be friends with Tony Khan if you need an arc.
Work
and
on
you need
that.
Lots of things, yeah.
But nevertheless, so Alexandra Pepperday was on this podcast, and we want to you should listen to the whole thing, folks, if you've got nothing else to do with your time. We want to promote them right now, but we just want to hear the salient points of why that we should believe that this young lady is qualified to write wrestling programming.
Well, it's beyond that too. Is she executive vice president, or what is her role? She has an actual role, right?
Well, a title and a role may be two different things.
All right, well, let's go to this audio here. This apparently is her talking about the difference between writing for soap operas and writing for wrestling.
What's the big difference jumping from soap operas to wrestling?
My awards actually in soap operas, which sometimes people don't actually know this, they're actually for directing, not for writing.
Right.
So I didn't know when I first started in wrestling at WWE, I didn't know anything about wrestling. I mean, I knew what it was.
You don't know anything about microphones either. What the hell are you speaking on, a can?
I hadn't, been a fan. I didn't have a background. So I kind of really just got to be like a sponge and learn everything I could from like a lot of very different talented people. And I realized that professional wrestling is like this magical, beautiful art form. And one of the things that I was really taken by was that the audience is actually like a character. So after I'd been working for a couple of months, like I had this sort of aha moment. And I was like, dramatically, it's not that different than a soap opera, except in professional wrestling, you have a good guy and a bad guy in dramatic conflict, but that conflict is solved by fighting in a wrestling ring. Whereas in a narrative drama, it's, solved by, someone gets shot, someone gets stabbed, people fall in love, people get divorced, someone's cheating on someone,
All of that happens in wrestling too, by the way.
It does. Hopefully not the shooting, but it does.
Yes.
The conflict is solved.
By the way, Will Washington sounds like Ed McMahon. But didn't she just basically read every person in college studying drama or writings paper that ever decided to write about wrestling? She didn't know anything about it besides that it existed until she went to work for the WWE. There's the first red flag that her perception of the whole industry might be somewhat skewed. And then proceeds to spout all of the same shit that everybody outside the business that knows all those words says about the business on a superficial level. Or am I just overstating that, Brian?
What do you think of her saying that the aha moment for her was realizing that in this magical, beautiful art form, the audience, is a character?
Oh, boy. And, if you're doing theater in the round and everybody's going to come out to hold hands and take the big bow and you've got to, just wonderful love in the air with it, but no. It's another example of somebody on the periphery of celebrity show business thinking that they can apply that to wrestling, when if anything, the wrestling, if you can get the wrestling and apply a little entertainment, a little showmanship, then you're kind of on the right track. If you're coming from this and trying to apply it the other way around, oh, Jesus, go ahead. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt here so far.
It's also important to note that it's not like soap operas are flourishing anymore. There are very limited jobs. There are very limited soap operas that are successful and that networks have stuck with. It's a dying thing. At one point, there were at least 3 or 4 on every channel, right?
Oh, The Edge of Night, The Secret Storm, One Life to Live, General Hospital. I could go on and on.
Well, AEW and General Hospital will be an interesting crossover, but let's go to this next one here.
Speaking of going on and on, let's go back to this.
This is Jennifer Pepperman on the differences between AEW and WWE.
So one of the things that I was really So the structuring of the show is very different than how, we would structure a show on WWE. And I've been fascinated by that. And the amount of storytelling within a match and the amount of like sort of pay-per-view matches we have on AEW is still continues to amaze me. I'm also struck by there's a freeness that really sparks creativity here. So I think that's been a really cool thing. And also I feel at AEW, like everyone really gets to feel heard creatively. And I think that's also really, really important. And so that was sort of some of how the structure is different, a more freeing process, if that makes sense.
I kind of love that observation about the story.
Let me stop this.
Freeing. Did they get her from the actor's studio? Does she look anything like James Lipton if he shaved his beard off?
The other thing too is if you're advocating for, how good things are and how great things are and what a wonderful experience it is to be around this, it's not working. Like you're advocating for a system that is failing and the results are visible to everyone.
But she sounds like it's, hey kids, let's put on a show. And she's applying she has very well spoken, knows a lot of them big words, but what is she saying that has any substance to it in terms of specificity on what we're doing, what's going on here? I'm sorry. Continue on.
Well, here is Jennifer Pepperman on what does a show day look like? So when they're going to do Dynamite, what does that day look like?
So I know Will probably knows the answer to this question because you guys work together so closely, but I actually have no idea. What does a show day look like for you?
A show day is a little bit different on a Dynamite day when Mercedes is there than maybe a collision day. They're kind of on a Dynamite day,
Well, hold on. Let me stop right there. It's different on a Dynamite day when Mercedes is there than on a collision day.
Apparently, Mercedes to be singled out at the top of the headline there is quite high maintenance.
I've pretty much, discussed whatever segments Mercedes and I are working on. And I actually do, sort of write out a segment for her so she can, see it. And I always find like with talent, especially if they have a match, if they're going to cut a promo, it's easier for you to write some words down for them. And it's easier to like look at that and be like, okay, well, I want to say this. I don't want to say that. I want to say this, rather than just them starting from scratch. I mean, that's just kind of like how I'm used to working. So Mercedes and I would have probably like emailed back or texted back, a segment. And then if there's something that needs to be rehearsed, we'll rehearse it. But then it's basically just, rehearsing the promo with her and, making sure she feels really good about it. Then if there's any other pre-tapes, that I can jump in on and help on, just sort of like lend a hand wherever I can sort of lend a hand.
Wait. First of all, from a business standpoint, so Tony Khan hired this woman to basically babysit Mercedes all day, and if she has time to jump in on another pre-tape, and she's making a full-time fucking salary of who knows how much, and she's admitting that Mercedes is not just kind of going out there and blurting some shit out. They've actually thought about this, and they've gone back and forth over this. And Mercedes is prepared for this, and we're seeing the end result of that rather than, shit, just go out there and say something.
Well, what do you think of the idea that it's easier, the way she put it, for talent that have a match to have the words written down for them?
Now, how did she say that again?
Because she said it's easier for talent that have a match, if they're going to cut a promo, it's easier to write the words down for them.
Okay, I didn't hear the match part. I just heard that it was easier for talents to... Again, here is the way it was done pretty much in every wrestling promotion ever. The booker or the booker's assistant, or later on with the WWF and WCW and et cetera, some level of 3 or 4 different agents and ex-wrestlers, the Pat Pattersons or the Blackjack Lanzas, would fucking call you in and sit down and say, here's your fucking match and here's what you're talking about. And then Vince, with the stuff that he really cared about, in recent years of 20 or so would really sit down with people and fucking harangue it to the bone as far as what they were going to say and everything. But again, to have someone this much preparation for what we're seeing on screen, Brian, has anybody said, wow, that Mercedes Moon, she tore it up on that promo. I can't believe her interviews. Did you hear what she said? Or for that matter, did you see what she did? I know who you are and I saw what you did. So this woman is admitting that they think this shit's good somehow. And it takes that long to work out what we're seeing as a finished product. And Tony Khan's paying her to do this. And she didn't know what the fuck wrestling was until she started working for the WWE, where she was one of, I assume, a couple of dozen on the writing staff. How do these people get these fucking jobs?
Does her salary go with the talent salaries? Or is that...
Well, no, I mean, well, for one thing, I don't know if you can call anybody on their writing staff talent, but nevertheless, no, if you're a writer, you're in office territory. You would be paid by the office, or paid as a member of the office staff, not a wrestler. Oh, well, I don't know what kind of screwy shit they're doing over there, but
let's go to some more audio here to review. This is Jennifer Pepperman answering the question, is there anything that has changed her perception on creating segments for wrestling since working for WWE?
I will definitely say over the last year, I think it's really important to listen to the audience and listen to the fan reaction. I mean, obviously, our fans are like our, third character in the scene. But I think somehow real recently, I think it's really important to listen to the fans and really engage the fans. And I think...
Wait, this is a recent development she's had, a recent thought that it's important to engage the fans?
Well, anybody in a wrestling business that uses the phrase third character in a scene ought to be strung up and have their entrails dropped over Cleveland. But it's not a fucking newsworthy nominal thing to engage with the fans. But the fact that she said you have to listen to, has she been listening to people not chanting CEO? Has she been listening to the loud level of indifference when Mercedes is moaning?
Well, let's go back to the...
Am I saying things that have not been...
No.
Has she been tearing a house down? Have people been standing and jumping up and down and setting the seats on fire and throwing babies in the air when Mercedes, like they do with others such as Rhea Ripley or even Britt Baker?
I think we could say that the feedback has kind of been universal. People are disappointed with the run so far, but let's go back to this audio.
When you are a wrestling fan, there's so much fun in trying to figure out what's going to happen. Like, oh, I know where they're going. They're going this way. And then there's an excitement of like, yes, I was right. That's what they're doing. And then there's an excitement of when you totally pivot and be like, oh, that's not what, oh, I thought they were going in a different direction. I feel like really listening to the fan engagement and really listening to the fan. I feel like, AEW does that. I feel like WWE really did that on the lead up to Mania, where there was sort of a big 180. And I think over time, as everything evolves and changes, our audiences are smarter and, obviously people consume entertainment differently now, even than they did 10 years ago.
Yeah, people consume AEW by turning off the TV.
Well, I was about to say they listen to the fan engagement of the WWE because it's so much easier to hear that many people. But again, this woman is very intelligent. She knows a lot of big words. I bet she went to college. But what is she saying of any substance about wrestling, dissecting wrestling, analyzing wrestling, her experiences in wrestling? Have you ever come up with a finish, Miss Pepperday?
Well, let's keep going. Again, there's a few more bits of audio
All
here.
right,
Maybe she talks
bits
about
and
this.
pieces.
Maybe she answers that. I don't know.
I think storytelling is a little bit different. I just think, as things change, and this goes for the narrative world too, dramas need to change with the times, so it's very, very interesting to me because whether you work in professional wrestling or you work in a narrative drama, or I should say, whether you're a fan of soaps or wrestling or sports, everything is very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
In soaps, our audience was always very vocal about, you should do this or you should do this. And same thing in wrestling, the audience is very vocal, which I think we all love. But even in professional sports, it's like, can you believe, the fourth quarter time was running out and they ran the ball? They should have thrown the ball. Fan-wise, everything is very subjective. I think it's very important to be in touch with what people like and what they don't like.
You're right. She's saying nothing.
Well, it's very important to be in touch with things that people like and things they don't like. Then why don't you people get in touch with those things? Again, this is a lecture. I can't say it's a college professor. It's somebody that invited you to a restaurant to hear a presentation. And they're speaking in generalities that sound good and are applicable in concept and have nothing to do with any specificity about what's going on in the goddamn company, how I book, why I book, what I like about this shit, or whatever.
Yeah, it sounds like she'd be a really good person to sell the company to other people and the positives of it, not a person who should be consulting Tony on the creative.
I think you got something there. I'd move her into sales.
Well, let's go to this. This is, it says here, Will Washington gives a long preamble leading up to the question. Do you want to hear some of the preamble leading up to the question, or do you want to try to
well, I mean, how can we lose the preamble and we won't understand the question?
Well, I won't even say what the question is. Let's see if we can figure it out.
One period of your career that I think it's a place where I think both AEW and WWE really found some new footing and got to thrive. And I'm talking about the pandemic, and specifically a time period where I think both companies really had to find new ways to storytell in a way where you don't necessarily.
You think they did? They did. There was no fans. They had no fans going to the shows. They built the whole fucking stadium of monitors. There were no fans. They had to come up with a whole new way to get wrestling to people at home. Yes. Let's go back to this.
Necessarily have that audience anymore, and you have to engage the viewer at home without necessarily having the tool of having the fans in the arena and sort of that unpredictable element. You worked very closely with Mercedes in that time period. You also worked very closely with Bayley in that time period. And that's really where Bayley became who I think a lot of people didn't expect her to. There was one role that people kind of knew she was for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, here she is in this new role. And then the pandemic really allowed her to grow. And like I said, in kind of the same way that.
What is this?
I don't know what these, you know what? They like to sit around and talk about wrestling a lot in the abstract terms.
Let me kiss ass in a number of ways about a number of people.
The pandemic introduced AEW fans to guys like Ricky Starks. Got to see Sting come in, and so much happened during that pandemic time period that really grew the product. So for you, I wanted to ask you, how much of your television background did you feel helped guide you in that era of not having the fans anymore?
I mean, the pandemic era, looking back now, was really a very, very special time. And Bayley and Sasha.
We're nostalgic for the pandemic now.
After the first 10,000 people died, I was like, something special's happening right now. This is a special thing happening.
Now that we can look back, it's been 4 years. I've got, good God, I got socks on that are older than the pre-pandemic socks. All right.
I will say for WWE really were like the MVPs of the of the pandemic. They really did. They had all the gold. They really did carry Raw, and SmackDown due to, a lot of people, not, a lot of other people being out and not us not having people. But in terms of
people being afraid they were going to die, so they didn't go to work.
Like getting to do the cinematic matches and stuff. So at AEW, we have no invisible camera, and I definitely get that. And that's a different, that's something that that I've had to learn and adjust to. But at WWE,
no, but stop it.
Whoa.
We have no invisible camera. See, before we could just make this shit completely out and out phony, but now we got to make it Only 96% phony. We got to admit there's a camera there before we do shit that's blatantly phony.
You know, you could, when you do have the invisible camera, it allows you to do some sort of very subtle things. And, you know, the camera can really help you tell story in a very different way. Like one kind of little tiny thing that I don't know if people notice.
The camera helps me tell story in a very interesting way.
It lets people see things.
But, you know, we were leading up to Bailey turning on Sasha, and everyone thought it was going to be Sasha turning on Bailey. And anytime we, you know, did a backstage pre-tape, and this was, you know, before Mercedes had, you know, won a title and stuff, I always would have her holding Bailey's title, like holding it and looking at it, and then like maybe a little bit too long and giving to her. But, you know, you could do something like start tight on a title, see someone's hands, pick it up, come to their face, you know, and then widen out, Bailey's warming up, and, you know, oh, here's your title. Like just sort of.
Oh, good Lord. Number one, nobody's ever thought of this before. Oh, somebody, you know, should have come up with this before, like fucking people 50 years ago, Leo Garibaldi, for Christ's sake. And besides that, like, she's overlooking she's directing a nice little pre-tape. If the people that are involved in this aren't over, it doesn't matter what they're doing. So she's not, you know, she's not directing these two actors. You got to have talent that's over doing the shit instead of your direction is not going to get anyway.
Little sort of nuance things like that. Like, I mean, one of the things I love about being a director is, you know, you learn how to visually tell story when you do have freedom and to do things very differently. I remember we did, we did a backstage with Dolph and Sonya, you know, right after, you know, the big Mandy and Otis, you know, WrestleMania thing. And just the way we shot that with her in the foreground and him behind her, you know, talking to her was very much like a two shot and tightening in. And so, and we were limited because we were in this time.
Yeah, and that's why people still talk about the Dolph and whoever you mentioned feud or
with whatever was going on.
Yeah, no one remembers any of this.
Tiny warehouse. So being able to have a lot of freedom with the camera, even in, you know, a minute 30 shot, it's a lot of fun to me. Because like I said, you know, it's fun, and just doing very subtle things in camera movement can really help tell a story. So that was really a lot of fun for me.
Hearing you describe that, it becomes very clear your directorial background, because you're telling the story purely just with camera shots. And it's like, oh, of course she has this incredible background, and it's definitely influencing a lot of like the way that you create.
By the way, I've never seen a soap opera shot like Scorsese was making it or something.
Well, besides that, these people are so serious talking about this fucking elemental fucking shit going on. Like nobody's ever thought of these things before, and they're so proud of themselves that they're able to discuss this on this level, on this sinking ship that they're on. And apparently after this was over with, they went around and sniffed each other's farts for a brunch. What the fuck?
We have a bit more audio.
Are they convinced that they're experts or what?
Well, let's go back to this. Maybe she'll explain.
All these segments and stuff, and it's just absolutely fascinating.
When we would do, and even like a 15-second shot, like camera movement can really help. So when I was working with Rhonda, like Rhonda's a legit really fighter, and she's really good at striking, you know? So I would be like to the guys, can we start on this empty frame and let her punches in and then widen out and we see it's her widening out? Or can we start on the shadow of her doing it on the wall and then come to her, you know? And even though it's only like a, 15-second shot, to me, it's very fun and very creative. But I understand why, there's definitely different schools of thought, and there's no right way to do something.
Let me stop it there. There's no right way to do something. What does that mean? There's no right way to do something.
Well, that
means the wrong way is always acceptable.
Rhonda could punch to the right. She could punch to the left. She could punch backwards. She could punch up. She could punch down. She can do all those punches.
Let me go to the last little bit here, Jim. And this is, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give someone who wants to write for wrestling? So maybe this could be our foot in the door once we hear this.
I guess I would say, this is just the way that I approach it, because it's kind of the only way that it's just how my mind works. I would say work backwards. I would say
Yes.
when you're trying to write.
Yes, fall ass backwards into an industry that you were never involved in before.
Yeah, my mind does work backwards, so that's how I did it.
A story, think of the end of the story, and then go back to the beginning and figure out how you're going to get there. But I would say think about the dramatic conflict. Think about what the good guy wants and what the bad guy wants. Think about why these two characters are fighting. And then overall, I would say to anyone who's getting into any career, you don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the most talented, but you can be the hardest worker. And it matters if you try hard, and it matters if you work hard, and it matters if you don't give up.
She must have been writing Cena stuff too.
No, I swear to God, I was going to say she was reading The Rock's Twitter.
So if this is your dream to work in wrestling, write your own wrestling show. Post it on Twitter.
What?
Keep trying. Keep trying. And the other thing is, like, don't let anyone tell you no. And like I said, like, just try hard. Just keep trying. You know, it's kind of like in Finding Nemo, like,
just keep swimming.
Swimming, just keep swimming. If I would ever get like down or insecure, like, I don't know what I'm doing. My God, I don't know. Is this any good? I wrote this. God, maybe this sucks. What am I doing? And I would just be like, just keep swimming, just keep. It really matters. Like, everyone thinks it's like, I told my son this. It's like, you know, he was a big soccer player, and I was like, you don't have to be the fastest, you don't have to be the strongest, you don't have to score the most goal, but you can outwork, out hustle, outlast. That's really the key.
All right, we're gonna cut it there.
Yeah, well. I'd love to see any of the three of these people, or all three of them, dropped in the locker room of the fucking Kansas City Memorial Auditorium in about 1973. They just have to work for Bob Geigel or just any territory of wrestling anywhere in the world, and let them start talking like that and see how long it took before somebody kicked them out to the lobby.
You're hearing components of AEW's brain trust. That's what's scary. This isn't just like, hey, this is the AEW fan podcast. No, it's Will Washington, who writes for AEW, who Tony Khan hired because he was saying positive things about Tony Khan's work as a wrestling booker. Aubrey Edwards, who does who knows what. Some people say she pulls down stuff on the internet, and I don't even know. And Pepperman, or Pepperday, whatever the fuck her name is. Her real name is Pepperman.
Alexandra Pepperday. You keep mispronouncing it.
Well, she's in the office, too. So it's not like this is a fan show. These are the actual people that are talking to Tony and either agreeing with Tony or giving Tony bad advice. That's the thing.
These reactions and these statements were literate and well-versed equivalents of when Vince Russo told me that it was so cool how he had just done it on camera inside the railing, because he had never been inside the railing while a match was going on before. And this was when he was writing part of the show. It's the same. You've got fans learned in all these different types of dramatic endeavors now actually booking the fucking wrestling, which is why it looks so fake and phony and choreographed and soft and childish and silly. That is what the business has been turned over to. The inside the actor's studio wannabes.
If you're listening to the fans, you would get rid of the women's division. I hate to say it, and I've said it before, but what drags down the rating every single week? What causes the fans to go silent in the building every single show, no matter where? No matter who's in it? Give them a separate show. Let them try to build something long-term with their own audience, as opposed to shoving it in the middle of these shows. The fact that the American wrestling promotions somehow got away from the fact that not all fans want to watch women's wrestling, so now they give them an overdose of it. And of course, the fans of women's wrestling say, it's not enough. It's too much. It's way too much.
They could give them Rampage. The ratings would almost have to go up.
But it would be a good thing, too. If you're serious about wanting to have a women's division, give them their own show, treat it serious, and build something, as opposed to they get shoved into the show. Because they're being used like that. It's like you want to give them a chance, but then you just shove them into the show, and then they cause the ratings to go down. But
well, and some of them have their own writers who then, after they're taken care of, get to hop in on other pre-tapes and help where they can.
So we talk about Mercedes' purported salary. You got to add Pepper Day on top of that because they came almost like a package deal.
Joined at the hip or whatever bodily part that they may be joined at. Where one goes, the other follows in some respect.
Let's stick with the hip. Let's be safe and stick with the hip.
Stick with the hip. Well, if you want to be the butt of a joke, go on a podcast and talk like a goddamn college professor about something you didn't even know existed until you got a job in it a few years ago.